Electric Lodge presents Notes from the Underground with Josh Berkowitz, where we talk to alternative storytellers, comedians, dancers, musicians, poets, and filmmakers about life, art, and we may just talk about nothing at all. Recorded live from Soul Journey Studios in Venice Beach, California. Have you been to any high voltages?
I went to one high voltage.
That I did? No, not that I did.
Jen performed at it. Were you the curator for that?
Was Jen with Sharna?
Sharna, uh-huh.
Yeah, that was my second ever curation.
Oh, wow. It was a great show.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it because you saw that it was like a pretty hybrid-y kind of.
Oh, yeah. But I loved everything in it.
Yeah, yeah.
There was it opened with a play.
Yeah, you know that guy's like a 77-year-old legend. Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah, right. I know.
Wow, I was so touched by that performance.
Oh, I know, amazing. Yeah,
and then there was that
the puppeteer
one, which I saw again.
Yeah, wait, did you see
Lightning series?
You see her in the first night? You were there on the first night
of the Lightning series. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's all full. All right, so you get you have a good.
I have an idea.
You saw one of my very first shows where I did like a hybrid-y, went from theater, puppetry to dance to performance art.
Yeah.
So I'm still doing that, but it just keeps changing on me.
Right.
So I may end the night with you because it just really seems like it's like a good.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
Yeah, right. But there's gonna be all this weird shit that's gonna happen before you. Are you okay with that?
That's fine. Honestly, we're aware of that. I've told plenty of people that I don't know what else is going to happen.
Right, that it's not just like a spiritual show. Somebody might take their shirt off. Right. Somebody with a mask might say some scary things.
Right. Like I was like, I have no idea what the other performances are.
But I want to close on a beautiful note because.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I did want to at one point. I didn't really want to be attached to it.
So you'll talk right into this thing.
Okay.
Oh yeah, she's good.
Yeah, you're good. Okay, you got it. Okay.
But the level of energy that we're sharing in this piece is so intense that I wanted to kind of give you a heads up that it would make sense to have it either before an intermission or at the end.
Let's as of right now, I mean, I could always change my mind, but and I don't want to do that.
Okay.
But at the moment it feels right for you to close the night.
Okay.
So
Sounds great.
Consider that.
I'll tell people.
Yeah.
And I even have a few people who are like, "Oh, I'm going to have Shabbat dinner. Can I come after?" I don't know when we're happening, but maybe there will be people that will show up.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, I really try to when I do
Close the
order, or no, it's great. I mean, they can come whenever. I mean, but I really try to order the night almost like a storyline.
Yeah.
Where there might be a darker piece that comes a few acts before you, or even directly before you that sets one tone, and then you just whip it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right. It's like careening 180s is a big part of my own work, and so that's kind of it happens. People get in December. I had the show that Roger was in, Roger Fohas, and
I didn't get to see that.
Yeah, that was a wild show for the end of the year.
I love him,
and oh my god,
his work.
Yeah, it's funny. I think when I met you at his Belonging workshop, you were the one who said to me basically "Oh, Roger's so heart-centered." Was that you who said that?
Probably.
Yeah, and
I don't know, but I really do
assuring.
think that.
Yeah, and he's one of these hybrid guys where he's doing a combination of
his
stuff.
art is it's so touching. Because I feel like whenever he performs, half the time I'm laughing, and half the time I'm about to start crying. Because this is so sweet.
His forest furries.
Yeah, or there's this element of tragedy in his work to a certain extent. I don't even know if he'd be comfortable with me saying that, but I feel
it's fine. Well, it's funny. I mean, this is a great place to start. It's he's got this show, Forest Furries, and he pitched it to me in a similar set. Actually, we were doing an interview like this, but I was just doing an audio recording of it where I was trying to transcribe information for my boss, and we're going, right? Yeah, we're going. Okay, great. Yeah, that's a good way to get going. Yeah, I was transcribing information for my boss for curating, to say, hey, I've been talking with this amazing guy, Roger Fohas, and he's got this show called Forest Furries. Let me read the transcriptions of our conversation that I recorded. And it's so funny because I'm like, oh, it's a kid's show. What he's doing is a kid's show for adults. Yes, but not meant to be dirty. Even if it ends up being dirty, that's not his intent.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, it's a kid's show.
Yeah.
He's like, but we're not going to go like, hey, kids. Like,
yeah.
Like, no, because it's for adults.
It's like I feel like it's a kids show for adults in that it's reaching our inner child, each person in the audience. Yeah. So even though it's meant for kids, I feel, to a certain extent, anyone who's watching it is going back to their experience as a child with that perspective and change of heart that you don't even realize if you grew up with kind of like a protected, sheltered childhood, all of the gifts that were given to you. And it's like he's giving them to you again. You're like, oh my goodness, that was so sweet when I had that at one point in my life. It's
really nice. Yeah. And so, this kind of brings us to your work and who you are as a person. And we don't know each other that well, but, I think I told you we were sitting down one day at the dance studio, you came by, and I said, oh yeah, I usually know by who somebody is if like they should like be in this particular show or that particular show. And we had planned, when did we meet to decide to do this March 3rd performance?
It was I think it was very early January. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Or I think it was... We'd started talking about it
even
in December. And then we met.
See, that's always January. A great sign to me. That's like, because I'm somebody who's a little bit like all over the place, but if I like plan to do something for a while, it usually is like it comes full circle and it builds and it's thorough.
Right. And this piece, I don't want to give it too much credit, but to a certain extent, like we've put so much time into a piece that's within an event with other performances. We've been working on this for at least 4 months, if not longer.
Where did it come from? What was the seed of it?
Well, I knew that I wanted to create a piece. Part of it is that I'm finishing my certification in the Dance of Oneness with Benefche Sayad, and I've been studying with her for years, and I'll be the first certified performer of this dance style.
Right.
And so I needed to create a piece as kind of my last necessity for receiving the certification. But this particular piece, as I started thinking about how I wanted to create it, I wanted to bring in all of these different elements of dance that I've practiced both with Benefche and on my own, and bring in, I wanted to bring in a musician like Alex, because I knew that if I had original music composed, I could offer a piece that would encompass so many of the different energetic states I've experienced in dance that I want to bring into my work. And that's really hard to do with an already existing recorded piece of music.
Can you tell me about the energetic states? Like what?
Sure. So in this piece, the first half is a little more sober. That's a relative word. But it's
sober's a loaded word. Yeah,
it is. I know. Who knows who's listening to this? What associations they have with that?
We all got all sorts of. Yeah.
But it's really, it's influenced by my yoga practice, which features, more stillness and almost. There's also almost something more martial about it, although I would say my dancing is very much in the feminine line, so the word martial might not come to mind for most people, but there's a sense of clarity and specificity in the beginning, and it's really an invitation for the audience to come into this world with us. And what ends up happening is, as it develops, I'm drawn into the trance state, which is, in Sufism, there's this theme of drunkenness, which is, to a certain extent, really foreign to the Western world, because it doesn't have to do with alcohol or anything, but it's about this experience of love, divine love, that's so deep and encompassing that it dissolves the mind, and it dissolves separation and actually changes your state of being. And there are actual movements that are practiced in different Sufi
my
traditions.
ears are starting to ring. I don't know if it's what you're saying or
that bring you into altered states of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And so the second half of the piece, I'm sampling different traditions and offering them.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So part of it is, so one example is there's a section of the piece that's what I would call trance dance, and it features Alexander strumming on the tar, which is a type of tonality that is really effective for trance.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this sequence that's it's kind of like sacred head banging. But you'll see this
sacred headbanging.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Tell me about
that. Wouldn't
that
be the
bit.
official name for it.
I like that because I like irreverent things. The word,
Yeah.
because I'm excited. I've suddenly, now that we're talking like a couple days before, and I've been like racking my brain about how to order the show, and I'm like, man, I can't really picture this lineup or how the hell. And then all of a sudden, like we started talking, and then it all started kind of coming into place, the order of everything. But my biggest fear was like, damn, like I'm so irreverent in my curating. Like, purposely, I go all over the place.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to do a disservice to what at least sounds like the reverence of what you're doing. But when you say sacred headbanging, I'm like, oh, I'm a sacred headbanger.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's very, the depth, which I feel about my practices is reverent, but none of this to me is religious.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a difference. It's mystic. It's not religious.
What's your definition of mystic?
I'm
going to ask a lot of definitions. That's part of part of the whole deal.
Sure. I would say that mystic practices are taught from the heart, with little importance given to dogma or rules, and much more emphasis given to feeling. And in the Sufi tradition, which is the mystic branch of Islam, it's seen often as really esoteric, which to a certain extent it is. It's not widespread, or at least openly necessarily. But it's also, these are practices that are meant to be accessible to people, not from a top-down system,
right,
but from a tradition that is hoping to connect people to worship of the divine. And so there is a lot of reverence with that, and yet to me it's so different than what we see as religious and religions. They're completely different approaches.
Right. Yeah, what got you into spirituality in the first place? Like for me it was around 18. Like I saw Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah,
it's funny because I was really angry. I'd spent a summer in New York doing Lee Strasberg method of acting.
Oh,
do you know that?
No.
It's like sense memory trauma.
Wow.
But I was like 17.
Wow.
I know, it's dangerous. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, Lee Strasberg's a dangerous guy. He's dead now, but his evil spirit lives on. But so, I'd like fallen in love that summer. I won't say with who, but it's a crazy story we won't go into. But I came home back, and I was like, to Michigan, and I was like, I'm so in love, and you don't understand everyone, and I became so miserable that I started punching walls and closet doors and stuff, and I got to a point where I'm like, wow, I can't even bear this anger in my chest anymore. And so I somehow on Netflix, when they used to still send you like the envelopes, which I guess some people still get, I got an Eckhart Tolle DVD, and he just he walks on stage, and he had this like he looks like a leprechaun, and he walks on. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? And why is he not saying anything? He's just looking around. What's that flowers next to him? Like, and he was like, notice the sounds
Wow,
in between.
that's an excellent Eckhart Tolle
Oh
impression.
yeah, I've been listening to him
listened
for
to him
years.
on audiobook, and you just sounded like him.
Yeah, he's like,
wow.
Yeah.
Nice, Josh.
Yeah. I'm a mimic. Yeah.
So he goes, notice the sounds in between my words.
And my brain started gapping for the first time ever. And I was like, whoa. And one single tear came down my eyes. And I was addicted to spirituality since then. But I've gone and I've strayed from Eckhart Tolle. He just makes too much money. And Oprah loves him too much for me. I mean, I love Oprah too, but different thing. So, and I got into some other teachers, and I was talking yesterday about a guru so I've weaved in and out of spirituality in different ways and gone into existentialism to burn out, any doubts I have about spirituality, and then bottom out through existentialism, then find my spirit again somewhere underneath there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. For me, existentialism and spirituality aren't exactly opposite things.
No.
Yeah.
And so I guess you're asking.
I'm asking you, what's your story?
So
I went on a tangent.
I know we could go really deep here. So I don't know. Feel free to cut me off. At any point.
No. But we could talk about existentialism. I guess I'm wanting to know what your existentialist moments are within your spiritual practice, because there's such a beauty to the way you speak about it. And what do you struggle with within all because I ran into Jen Hong the other day, and she was saying, she's like, oh yeah, Maura's on another level, so I'm getting really excited to see you do this.
Thank
and clearly you are.
Yeah.
And I'm always into the gritty stuff too.
Yeah.
Like, what's the grist for the mill?
So I suppose the potent moment or phase that led to it was after my mom's death.
Sorry.
Thank you. We were really, really close. I had a wonderful relationship, and she died when I was 17.
Wow.
And I was raised Catholic and was pretty devout Catholic. My father's, I wouldn't say conservative Catholic, but very committed to his religious faith.
Yeah.
And my mother was too, although a little more liberal. And in my teenage years, speaking of existentialism,
Right.
with that crisis that taught so much about mortality, and meanwhile in my own path, I had been really, really politically engaged as a teenager, and started to
in the with politics,
like in terms of following it and having really emotional responses.
President during this period?
Well, okay, so early teens, pre-teens, Bush.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah. Okay, yeah, we're around the same age. Yeah.
Yeah, and I experienced my first depression when Bush was reelected, all this stuff. Anyway, so
I was the dead opposite. I was not into. I mean, I watched the debates and stuff, but it's only recently when it's gotten me.
Okay.
But anyway,
yeah, it started at a really young age for me. And anyway, I was going to church still regularly as a teenager when I was in boarding school, to Catholic mass, and the particular mass I would go to regularly, the priest became really political, but very much with opposite views of mine. Oh. And I had these internal struggles with what was happening, because I still felt really aligned with what I'd always believed and practiced, but I was like, I just can't stand what you're saying. It makes me angry, and why am I here practicing if I'm angry? It's not serving me. Anyway, long story short, after my mother's death and those experiences, I stopped practicing Catholicism and really stopped practicing kind of any spiritual practice for a few years. And I also, I really let grief take over. And I was in college, and I was studying Persian literature and Middle Eastern politics, and I was dancing a lot. And I read this book, an Iranian novel called Women Without Men. Read it. It's amazing.
Women Without Men sounds
it's a good
healthy.
Well, it's I could talk for an hour about that book. It's an Iranian novelist who uses magical realism in her stories. She's a contemporary writer. It's amazing.
Ordering that book on Amazon today.
And I'd heard a little bit about Sufi whirling. I don't remember from where. And I read this book. I wanted to create an interdisciplinary piece that interpreted this story and put it on the stage. And I ended up getting a grant from UVA to go to Turkey and study Sufi whirling, which I wanted to use to symbolize the final image in this book, which was a woman and her child and her partner being covered by a lily and floating up into the sky. And I went to Turkey and I first met Benafshe there, and she taught an introduction to whirling. She taught a whole retreat, and I fell in love with her work, but I especially fell in love with whirling. And I came back to the States, spent a year writing my thesis on Rumi, or began to plan to, and then I went back to Turkey and I spent 33 days whirling. And like that is how my spiritual, my current spiritual practice really opened up. Was in 2011. I went to a Sufi dargah where they have these long, continuous semas, which is a gathering of people who are whirling, which is the trance stance of turning to the left continuously, while there's music played, which is usually songs that are inspired by Rumi's poetry.
Right.
And the experiences I had there were, one, really psychologically therapeutic. I went through so much personal transformation, and then it was also just the most natural, devotional, spiritual practice I'd ever found for me, because it's a moving meditation, and I hadn't experienced that before. In that way. And once I began, it's just, that's my practice. It is. And I fell in love with it. And
that's so wonderful. I just wanted to say briefly, like there's a class taught on Monday nights here called Walking Theater Group. And it's been really helpful. It's taught by Joseph Culp, one of our artists in residence. And, at the beginning, I won't go into his method. He'd have to talk about it. I'll probably bring him on next week. But with anything, you basically say, okay, I'm now going to walk, neuroses. And then you walk it out, and, he asks you a series of questions. But it's kind of, you mentioned moving meditation, and that.
Wait, that's really interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more, like an example?
Awesome. Well, let's see. So, what happened last week? Something like something happened. The room was like psychically and empathically totally in tune. Somebody, funny enough, was there was an energy worker, like a new energy worker in class that day, and she had somebody else walk her, like this problem that she was dealing with. It was like, I'm now going to walk. Somebody else walked it for her, like something she wanted to see play out. He said, I'm now going to walk this woman's spiritual practice. And then he started walking it out. And at one point he exploded with joy, like ecstasy, bliss, outrageous, exploded. And that was amazing. Wow. But then a moment later he crashed. And then he started picking a fight with one of the people in the class. And was like, let me touch you. And he didn't even realize, he didn't know her story. He didn't know what, her whole deal was. But he was playing out her whole cycle of everything. The highs of her teaching, the lows of it, of wanting to teach other people and pushing it and, and wanting it to work, wanting to have it be beautiful all the time, So it's just, it just made me think about moving and how much moving. I was just working with somebody, doing a little coaching an hour ago. And as soon as I got this guy to move, everything just, the fluidity was just there, and it like was night and day. What do you think it really is about moving meditation that affects the body? I mean, there's obvious general broad,
there's
understanding,
there's
of course. But
so much to talk about. I think first what I would say is that moving meditation, I believe, is one of the most natural entrances to meditation, as long as you can maintain a certain level of comfort in your own body and make it really, really simple. So what I'm doing, for example, with my performances is complicated because I'm a dancer. I have, background in movement. But really the idea of movement meditation could be, as you're saying, just walking or moving really slowly in a circle, or lifting and lowering your heels. I think movement allows us to be really, really present, partly through listening to sensation, but also there's an invitation when we begin to move that allows us to simply be in a way that, for me, I practice seated meditation because it's good for me. It's hard for me to be still, so I practice. But with, and I practice yoga, but they're really different experiences. With movement meditation, I find that it's easier to let time dissolve because everything is always moving. Even when we're still, we're never fully still.
No,
all the cells in our body are moving. Our heart is beating. Even when you're dead, you're not still because the earth is moving below you. Everything is always moving.
That's nice, right?
It's constant. That's the only constant. And I think if you can find a way to embrace that and allow for there to just be a constant flow, find your flow, continue with it, then you just are.
Oh yeah, it's funny. I just started getting back into my Tai Chi practice recently. And it's so subtle. So like, it makes such a difference in my performance work and my life.
Yeah.
But it's so subtle. It's also, all this work is so subtle. So there's nobody to, people can be like, oh man, your body seems more fluid these days. But why do I stop myself from like good stuff like that? Of like, oh man, this moving meditation of Tai Chi helps my life in every single way. And it is exactly what we're talking about, of just this awareness of everything is moving. And yet maybe it's something in my brain. It's my brain convincing me not to do it because my brain wants things to stay still and grab onto and like hold and freeze things in place to have control, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think to a certain extent, we're all like creatures of routine.
Yeah.
And society doesn't teach us to use our bodies to their full potential.
Yeah.
So there's that
as
well.
Where do you get stuck these days with things?
Where do I get stuck?
I'm like such a neurotic, so I like need to talk about neurotic things of how horrible an existential life is. But I then from there I like, and then but I'm also very spiritually like, I've gotten to a place more where I need to affirm and be positive and this and that. But I know.
I don't necessarily feel stuck anywhere. In terms of challenges, is that
frustration? Maybe. Yeah, because it's funny.
Okay, I'll talk about a frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
I have a frustration with apathy. Okay, and clearly this is my own judgmental bias, but especially within the spiritual world, drives me crazy to think that so many people see spirituality as something that's, positive oriented and then becomes disconnected from the rest of the world. I actually really, I deeply respect my teachers who they have a deep spiritual practice and it has taught them how to engage in the world, not how to isolate and disconnect.
Right.
Because what's the point?
This is what I'm talking about. Right. This is where like I like spirituality that just gets gritty, where it can be practiced, or that, ultimately one of my best spiritual teachers, Adyashanti, have you heard of him? No. he's like, yeah, you could get all this great stuff from me. You may come to this retreat and have total bliss for 2 days, but you're going to go home and you're going to crash, and then you have to deal with your life.
Right.
And your life's your best teacher. So,
right.
I mean, as everybody says, but really, and that life's going to whip your head around and make you look in the mirror as many times as it takes. And you might burn out, you might bottom out, spiritual bottom out, you know.
And I mean, everyone has personal work to do, but to a certain extent, once you have traveled a certain extent on your path and have found alignment, why would you not bring that into the world? So I don't know if I've been clear or not, but I'm definitely referring to the political climate in our country. Because I've found myself wanting to distance myself from people who are, you know, maybe in the New Age scene who think, I don't know, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but some are so obsessed with being light that there's this refusal to acknowledge the dark.
Yeah.
And to me, that's actually not light at all.
Yeah. No,
we live in duality, and we live in
candles.
reality.
They call it sandals and candles.
Yeah.
Santa Monica's like really infamous for Venice too, you know, but I have found people who are becoming more engaged, and that's really encouraging, and that's awesome. And I think there are places for spiritual people to be in this world, and they're needed. And, you know, for example, I'm interested in taking meditations into the protest scene. And there was something that happened somewhere else in the world, maybe in Turkey or somewhere, where there was like
the silent standing protest. Yeah, that happened a few years ago. It was really, really powerful.
Right, because police, I mean, what do police do with it? Like even Trump, you know, it's like, he's like, well, you know, pathetic. They didn't say anything. Like, no, you can't, like, you can't argue with it.
Right? It is powerful. It actually really is powerful.
It's disarming as hell.
Yeah. And I think with, when you bring those kind of practices into, you know, in front of the media, into the street, there's the potential for people to really see what's happening. It's very hard to twist something like that. It's really hard to manipulate something like that.
It's had a vision. We'll discuss it later, but because I've been having my main fight, my main resistance is trying to keep this place, Electric Lodge, going, and that's been my resistance to what's happening. And I don't know if
that's needed.
Yeah,
that's needed. Where's the arts fund going?
I haven't had a lot of time to really go to protests.
Yeah.
And you know, so everyone came after the Women's March on the 21st. It was beautiful, and I didn't realize that I was going to be able to be of service in that way. I didn't have a show that was in the parking lot and upstairs, all this really epic stuff that night, as a part of the Lightning series. And you know, so I was like, oh, this is my role in this, is to help facilitate, you know, more heavy duty art. But it's so scary sometimes, but in a way, and I was talking to my coach today, it's like, no matter what happens, I know that this is now what I'm going to be doing.
Right.
In one way or another.
Right. And we need more art. And art is such a powerful way to communicate with other people.
Yeah.
There's several ways I want to, you know, activate and connect with more people about how to bridge spirituality and politics and policy. But one of my first thoughts after the election was, and back then it was, you know, kind of just rumors and rumbles of this potentially forthcoming Muslim ban, which actually then happened. And I don't consider myself Muslim, but I practice Sufi whirling, and I was taught by a community where there are many people who consider themselves Muslim as Sufis. There are also people who practice Sufism who are like closer to atheists. It's really a broad range of the spectrum.
I'll have to really look at that.
Talk more
I
about
like
that at some
spectrums in general.
Yeah.
Spectrum's fascinating me.
But you know, I felt when I was hearing that ban might be coming forward, and thinking about how loud a voice there is in the world right now that encourages separation, and how I would imagine it's especially loud in the middle of this country in a lot of the larger red states, and how I would like to take a piece like the one I'm performing on Friday
and put it
and bring it, bring it to like a small town in Kentucky and say, hey, I actually learned this in a Muslim community, and what are your associations? And maybe a lot of people will hate it, but I also want you to know that this is a practice that comes from that tradition, and my hair is uncovered and my skin shows, and I was welcome there, and this is really a loving practice. What are your associations? What do you assume about this? And how can we break those down?
Yeah, this what you're speaking about, this touring to red states, is really big in the LGBT community, that it's important that a lot of strong, gay performance artists or lesbian performance artists spend their time in red states.
Yeah.
And I have to start thinking about this more. It's like, it's a calling. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So who knows?
Get the conversation going. I feel like even if you go and people are angry or upset, it starts a conversation. Mm-hmm. And right now I feel like there aren't enough conversations being started or bridges attempted to be built. And art is such a wonderful way to do that.
Would you feel afraid at all to put yourself in this situation?
I wouldn't.
No.
I'm generally not fearful.
No, you don't seem that. I'm like, where's the fear?
I don't have much fear.
I'm like, that's amazing. How did you do that?
Well,
I guess when you go through certain things.
Exactly. Going back, I think I learned at a really young age, like the tragedy of death, and then that erased it for me. It's like if you experience, not for everyone, but for me, once I experienced the intensity of a tragic loss, it taught me to not fear that. It simply became part of life. Yeah. Painful gift, but really, really, to a certain extent, has helped me expand.
What would you, I'm thinking about two words right now. I'm thinking about tragedy, and then I'm thinking about miracle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what your experience is with those two words in relation to each other.
Yeah. Well,
not to impose my
that's
thought. I'm trying to get connections.
That's okay.
From you. I'm trying to help you.
Right, connecting them. I definitely would never tell anyone who's experienced a tragedy, this is secretly a miracle.
No.
Because that's awful.
Hell no.
And if anyone is, that's another thing that like the new agey scene sometimes does, where you're like,
oh, right, it's a blessing in disguise for everything happens for a reason. Hell
you're
no.
Like, no.
I wouldn't go as far as to say tragedy and miracle is two sides of the same coin. They're different ends of the spectrum, but they're still on a spectrum of life experience.
Sure. And
the range of things we can experience in a life.
Absolutely.
Right.
My teacher, Ben F. Shea, says we can choose to see in all love or a call to love. And that to me has been one of the most profound teachings of hers, because I see that always. I see it in every part of our world. There's always love present. And if there isn't, it's like there's negative space that's calling it. It's like, here, this is where we need it. Come, bring it here. We need more. For some reason, there's a lack of it, or it's been covered up. And I think that to a certain extent, there's the connection between tragedy and miracles. When there is a tragedy, there's potential for some change to occur that can be miraculous and restorative.
Right. It's not the event itself that is a miracle. Definitely not. It's what, the grace, let's say.
Yeah.
What do we do with the darkest
things?
Yeah. That's wild. I have a few things that I've asked some other folks, but I think it's funny. Actually, I'm going to ask you this because I've asked some other folks because there's not a lot of, but some comedy in the show on Friday. And it's funny, I've been talking about this. My therapist gave me these flashcards about values and what are my values and like eliminating things that are, and getting down to the core couple values. And I was surprised because the last two were like passion, which I wasn't surprised about, but then humor. And I'm like, I guess I'm somebody who's got a sense of humor, but not in like a hot, like I'm not a stand-up comedian as much as at one point a couple of years ago, I was like, I'm going to do stand-up. I'm just going to be a miserable stand-up comedian. Yeah. No. But humor, like, why did that end up being my final thing here? And I guess from your perspective, which is different than some of the comedians I've interviewed, like, what is humor on the deepest level, or what is humor as a definition for real?
Well, there's so many different kinds of humor, right?
Right. What's your sense of humor?
There's a range there. I do have, a side of me that really enjoys like political, satirical humor, kind of in a, and that can be a little cynical because it's kind of like, oh, what can we do but laugh?
Those pictures.
Let's just try to laugh a little about it.
Disgusting satirical photos are great sometimes.
Yeah, or not even photos. I mean more like stand-ups that make their... anyway.
Yeah. You see Melissa McCarthy as Sean Spicer?
Oh my God. Yes. It's so good.
And it's like some of it's like mainstream
and you
humor.
Need that. It's
right. But I freaking love it.
To me, it releases some stress.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that definitely serves a purpose in that way. Like certain things.
That's been one of the only reliefs of this whole like period of time in the last 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think humor, does a wonderful job of reminding us of like the triviality of a lot of the things that we give our attention to.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it for that, because there's so many times when there's something that could just be sucking your energy away and you just change the tone in which you're talking about it and you're like, oh my God, of course. Like it's not actually that, it doesn't need to bear that much weight in my life. And I think humor is a really useful tool for that. But then more, I don't know if everyone would have this definition of humor. But really when I see comedy that I appreciate, I experience joy.
Right. Joy.
I experience joy.
Yeah.
And not all humor takes you there, honestly.
Oh, no. A lot of people were talking about yesterday. Some humor is like really sad and like the most fucked up stuff. Like,
oh, totally. To a certain extent, it's like we laugh about the things that are really true that other's we couldn't bear to talk about.
Humor, and there's
that. But there's also humor, artistic acts that present humor where you just like, you lose yourself in laughter. You lose yourself in laughter. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts of life. And and also humor going way back. I don't want to say it incorrectly, but it also has, isn't there an etymological association with health? Humor and health? Like in like Middle English, there's like this talk about, oh, he has good humor, but really they're saying like he's very healthy, and I often have that association as well, with like the ability to laugh is really healthy. Yeah. It's so needed, just as equally needed as the ability to cry, but we need these emotional outlets. Yeah. And,
what's your definition of health? I just keep breaking down words.
Health. 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 Well, let's see. That's a really good question because ultimately, what I want to work in long term through my dance and movement and yoga as a teacher is in health and wellness. And this is actually not making it more concise, it's adding a word, but I know some people talk about radiant health, And to me, there's a connection there. Like really when I'm thinking of health, I'm thinking about full body, mind, spirit radiance in which you're able to vibrate at your fullest potential. So on the body level, maybe that encompasses, your system working well.
Yeah.
Like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
On the mental level, clarity. And on the spiritual level, connection. Continuous connection. Yeah. But really, I place so much value in taking care of this container we have, this container of our body.
I gotta eat better. I've been having stomach problems.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I know why. I just gotta work on it. Like, but I get jealous when people are like, "Oh, if you just drink enough water and fruit, your skin will get better." And I'm like, but I think on a spiritual plane, what is that? What is it like? What do I have to drink and eat on the spiritual plane on a daily basis to be that kind of radiant?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't give you a prescription.
What?
No. And also because it's going to be different from every person. Should I talk about my own?
Yeah, please do. Yeah,
regimen?
I got medicine that I take.
Sure.
But I just need to take it, right? What's yours that you either like, I have to take my medication today, spiritual medication today.
Yeah.
What is that?
So I move every day.
When you what about in the morning? Do you have a morning?
Not immediately necessarily. If honestly, sometimes I have to get to work and I wake up at 6 a.m. and it doesn't happen. Other days it is immediately when I wake up. For me, no, it's more of a commitment to move in some way with intention and meditation, at least once a day. And sometimes that's more of a dance practice. Sometimes that's my yoga practice. Sometimes that's running the Santa Monica stairs. Sometimes that's doing calisthenics workouts at the beach, like on the pull-up bars, parallel bars.
Oh, wow. Cool.
It's really like, it varies from just producing sweat to some days doing more of like a yin yoga practice. But it's listening. It's a commitment to listen to my body on a daily basis and hear what it needs.
Yeah.
And attempt to give it that.
Right.
And then on the level of nutrition, I'm vegetarian. I'm not like one of those vegetarians who's like, everyone has to be vegetarian, but it works for me. And I'm vegetarian for many reasons. It's partly environmental. I'm an environmentalist, and there's a huge impact you can make on our planet by being a vegetarian. There's also, from a spiritual aspect and the yoga practice, it's the idea of not having killed anything that you're then ingesting. So you're not ingesting like an energy of aggression. And then there's, which is actually from a few traditions. And then I also just find my body, like I have a relatively high metabolism, and works well for me to not have to spend a ton of time and energy digesting something like meat. Like I can eat several small meals a day that are vegetarian, and my body like just whips through it.
Wow.
And then I also, I'm like 93% organic.
What's the other 7%?
Oh, just awful stuff, probably. No, but as much as possible. I eat organic because I don't want to put chemicals in my body. And I just had a talk with someone, actually, the musician I'm collaborating with, about water. And now I think I'm going to have to start buying water because it's just awful what's in the local water supply. And I had kind of intentionally
get water bottles.
Ignored it a little bit, but it's like...
You're finding out?
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Let's expose this thing. Yeah.
Right. Though I don't know. There's so much that we put in our bodies that affects our health. So, really basic, obviously everyone says it, exercise and what you eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it matters.
Yeah, I got a problem. If I'm running to the bathroom, I got a problem. This is enough of a sign as anything. Like I'm not putting the right things in my body. Or maybe I just have a stomach condition or really Jewish or something.
I don't know. I mean, I would definitely approach it nutritionally.
Yeah.
There's also, I mean, earlier when you were talking about that walking practice, I want to share I'm really interested in somatic psychology.
Oh, it's totally, yeah, so I'll make a quick plug for Joseph Culp's walking theater group on Monday nights 7 to 10. Cool. Just show up and he'll take care of the rest of the details and I'll be there. And it sounds like you'll
Maybe
be there.
I will.
But I'm going to make a bigger plug to your performance on Friday, which it looks like is going to close the night. So I've been guessing how to say your last name, how to pronounce it.
Do you want to take a guess?
I've been
French.
Is it Tousignant?
Close.
Tousignant.
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 Damn, cool. I'm excited to say that on Friday night. So Maura Tousignant will be doing her performance. Hey.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, hi.
Hi.
A prayer performance.
We're calling it a prayer-formance.
Prayer-formance.
Yeah, with Alexander Maymond.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we've been really talking about this for a while, so it's a long time coming. Sounds like a lot of people are coming to see it. It's going to be a very quirky night, but we're going to end the night on a very powerful spiritual note. That's my current plan.
Yay.
And if I change that, you'll look in my eyes. Something's wrong in my eyes, that something in the world, like I don't want it to be beautiful. And you could just be like, Josh, come on. Don't focus on the 7% of non-organic. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So I think we had a great talk, and I'm actually like very inspired to move. I may do some Tai Chi after this, and we're going to get you some rehearsal space. And yeah, the Electric Lodge, I got to give it to Dr. Joel Shapiro. He's had this place open for 20 years. Ooh. We're fighting to just keep going, and we've been changing a lot of things. And Rabbi Lori Shapiro is really killing it. She's really pushing Open Temple to a very high level. And we have Jeremy Lawrence, who's our sound engineer and studio manager, who has allowed this podcast to be possible. And we just came with our title, Notes from the Underground, which is from a Dostoevsky novella, which is really dark. But we're quoting it, we're taking it, and the underground could mean a lot of other things too. We're just taking notes from that. So I'm very grateful to have you. I'm very grateful to have you on Friday. And I've just learned that there's like things I'm going to take from this conversation and apply to my life, or call you and ask you about it.
Please do anytime.
Please. I need as many spiritual forces in my life as possible, because the momentum of darkness, it's like, that's a real thing.
Well, supporting art is absolutely needed and really spiritually practical.
Yeah, it feels nice to be of service. I wasn't a big community believer until a couple of years ago, till I came here.
Wow.
Year and a half ago, or year and 7 months ago. So it's happening.
Yay.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much. Absolutely. Thank you. This has been Electric Lodge Presents Notes from the Underground with Josh Berkowitz. We hope you enjoyed, and tune in next time. Recorded live from Soul Journey Studios in Venice Beach, California.